Who was Melchizedek? Who Melchizedek was is not made clear from available sources and reference materials. Numerous speculations arise as to his identity. He is said to be without birth and death, father, mother and descent. As such, his existence is a mystery. He is invested with fanciful and mythological conceits. Some, however, trace him back to a father of one branch of the human race, to Shem and others to Noah. He is regarded by certain authorities, Bryant Analysis of Ancient Mythology, as Sadiq, who is also identified with Cronus, Father Time, or Saturn, personifications of planetary principles or gods. Such personifications were not the exception, when the mystery of the relationship between heavenly principles or astrological names and early historical characters as Cain, Abel, Noah, Abraham, Moses, are considered. From Bible and history account, Melchizedek is referred to as the King of Righteousness or My King is Righteousness. He was the king of Salem and priest of El Elyon, often translated as Most High God. He was first mentioned in Genesis 14:18-20, where he brings out bread and wine and then blesses Abram and El Elyon. Hebrews 7:1-2, also identifies him. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings, and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation King of Righteousness, and after that also King of Salem, which is, King of Peace. Melchizedek was without mother, without father, without descent, or as the Phillips translation renders it. He had no father or mother and no family tree. He was not born as human beings are. He was without a father and mother. This does not mean that Melchizedek's records of birth were lost. Without such records, human priests could not serve, as seen in Ezra 2:62. But here Melchizedek had no genealogy. He must not have been an ordinary mortal. He had no descent or pedigree from another but was self-existent. Notice Paul's inspired interpretation of this fact in Hebrews 7:3, having neither beginning of days, nor end of life. Therefore he has always existed from eternity. He was not even created, like angels. Melchizedek is thought to have been the king of Jerusalem. Salem, of which he is said to be king, is likely Jerusalem. Psalm 76:2 refers to Salem in a way that implies that it is synonymous with Jerusalem, and the reference in Genesis 14:17 to the King's Valley further confirms this identification. Melchizedek in the Old Testament was a type of Christ, rather than an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ, a theophany. Because he seemed to have been a real person, one of the Jebusite kings of Jerusalem who held the title, not the name, Melchizedek. That is, King of Righteousness, the way that Pharaoh was a title rather than a name for Egyptian kings. Melchizedek was the King of Righteousness whose kingdom is a kingdom of peace. The book of Hebrews then points to Melchizedek as a type of Christ in that Jesus Christ is a priest not of the Levitical order. He does not do his work inside the earthly tabernacle, but he does it in the heavenly realities. He is a priest of a different order, an eternal order, one that has no beginning or no end. He was a priest in an order that had no beginning, because Jesus is the order's greatest priest, it will also never end. Genesis is filled with genealogies, but for Melchizedek, there is no record of his lineage, before or after. Melchizedek was a priest in an order that had no beginning, because Jesus is the order's greatest priest, it will also never end. The great news found here is that Jesus is not a Levitical priest for the Israelites, but a priest of the order of Melchizedek, meaning he is a priest for all. Melchizedek resembles the Son of God, and this allows him to serve as an earthly representation of the Messiah. This is why the Lord chose to name him as the head of the order of priests to which the Messiah, represented in Psalm 110 by King David, would belong. Some takeaway about Melchizedek. 1. He had no family record. The Jews were all about genealogies, read 1 Chronicles. Yet Melchizedek has none. There is no Melchizedek, son of so-and-so. No mention of a mother. No mention of a son, nothing. The author of Hebrews makes a pretty big deal out of this. He contrasts the lineage-based priesthood of Aaron with Melchizedek, who has no recorded birth or death or anything. 2. He was only mentioned 3 times in the Bible. The books Melchizedek is mentioned in are Genesis, Psalms, and Hebrews. The Genesis account introduces Melchizedek close to the beginning of Abraham's story. Melchizedek was introduced as a king during the time of Abraham. The Old Testament is silent about him until the book of Psalms, which alludes to him when describing a royal priesthood. This is probably a good sign that the figure of Melchizedek had retained some religious significance to Abraham's descendants. Much later, in the book of Hebrews, Melchizedek is shown as a case study for Jesus' priesthood. 3. The New Testament account explain more about him than the Old Testament account. Melchizedek is first mentioned in the Old Testament, and so you may expect the Old Testament to have more to say about him than the New Testament. Compared to the New Testament, the Old Testament does not say a lot about Melchizedek. His role in the Bible takes place in a span of just a few verses in Genesis. Melchizedek's name is mentioned 10 times in the Bible. Once in Genesis, Gen 14-8, once in Psalms, Ps 110-4, and the rest are in Hebrews. Hebrews spends all of chapter 7 discussing his priesthood. 4. He lived during Abraham's lifetime. We first met Melchizedek after one of the less famous stories of Abraham in the Bible. After God called Abram from Ur of the Chaldeans, but before his name was changed to Abraham, the patriarch found himself in an interesting situation. His wealthy nephew Lot had been kidnapped. Chedorlaomer, the king who had been controlling the city-states of the region, was off conquering the nearby world. While he's on Slay Canaan, 5 of the vassal kings back home rebel, including the king of Lot's town. Chedorlaomer drove the 5 rebel kings into hiding, then takes the spoils from Lot's city. Unfortunately for Lot, his family and herds are part of Chedorlaomer's spoils of war. He makes Lot his prisoner and moves on. But Abram's not too happy about this. So he took 318 trained warriors, beats Ched in battle, and took Lot and the spoils back to Canaan with him. It was at this time that Melchizedek met Abram and blessed him. 5. He was a priest of the Most High God. A priest is someone who performs religious rituals for divine beings on behalf of people. They also frequently offer sacrifices and do other things on behalf of humans. The books of Exodus and Leviticus give us a good look at some of the requirements God and Moses had for the Hebrew priests. We are not sure exactly what kind of rituals Melchizedek performed, but it is safe to assume that blessing people on behalf of God was one of them. 6. He was a king. He was the king of Salem. Salem was a city-state in the land of Canaan. Salem means full, complete, safe, whole, and peaceful. The author of Hebrews calls attention to this when likening Melchizedek to Jesus. Melchizedek was the king of peace. Which makes us think of another prince of peace we know in Hebrews 7:2. The city seems to live up to the safe and peaceful parts of its name. This is also interesting because the ancient town of Salem later becomes known as Jerusalem, which is where the temple of God that Solomon built stood. The author of Hebrews was especially keen on connecting Jesus to Melchizedek. Jesus is the son of David, the king of Jerusalem. And Jesus is the high priest of a new covenant, much like Melchizedek was a priest. 7. His name means king of righteousness. The name comes from 2 Hebrew words, Malik, king, ruler, and Sadiq, righteous, just, innocent. 8. His rulership is royal and everlasting. Psalm 110 is a messianic prophecy that tells us 2 things God promised to do for Jesus. Make Jesus the king in Zion and make Jesus a priest. Psalm 110:4 says, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." And of course, the permanence of Melchizedek's priestly order is important to the author of Hebrews, since Jesus is the resurrected great high priest of the new covenant between God and man. 9. He is greater than Abraham and Aaron. Hebrews made it clear that when it comes to outstanding human beings, Melchizedek trumps Abraham in Hebrews 7:7, so much so that Abraham gave Melchizedek a tithe of all the spoils he collected on his mission in Genesis 14:20, and Hebrews 7:4. And if Abraham looked up to Melchizedek and Aaron looked up to Abraham, this puts the order of Melchizedek in the totem pole than Aaron's priesthood.